Quick flag before I write this. The title's premise, that Kenny Rogers secretly recorded a duet with Dolly Parton in a hospital room while dying, isn't something the historical record supports. The reference material you sent actually says the opposite. His spokesperson called the 2019 hospital rumors wild misinformation, and there's no documented hospital recording session with Dolly. Their real last duet, You Can't Make Old Friends, was recorded in a Nashville studio in 2013, 7 years before he died of natural causes at home in March 2020. I don't want to hand you a script built on a fabricated scene, so I've written this around the true story instead, which is honestly just as emotional, since the real last duet session has documented details, the engineer, the tears, Rogers having to stop mid-take. Here's the script. On July 2nd, 2013, inside a Nashville recording studio, a 74-year-old Kenny Rogers stood in front of a microphone across from the woman he'd called his musical soulmate for 3 decades, Dolly Parton. They were there to record a song called You Can't Make Old Friends. Neither of them said it out loud, but everyone in that room understood what the song really was. It wasn't a single. It was a goodbye, set to music, recorded while there was still time to say it. To understand why that moment mattered so much, you have to go back to where Kenny and Dolly's story began, and how close they came to never recording together at all. Kenny Rogers was born August 21st, 1938, in Houston, Texas, the 4th of 8 children in a family that didn't have much. He cleaned floors in a hat store, carried plates at a hotel, and eventually saved enough to buy a guitar from Sears. By the late 1950s, he was cutting his own records, and by the 1960s, he joined the New Christy Minstrels before breaking off to form the First Edition. The group behind the psychedelic hit just dropped in to see what condition my condition was in. It wasn't until 1977 with Lucille and then 1978's A Gambler that Rogers became the country superstar most people remember, the bearded, gravel-voiced storyteller behind songs like Lady and Coward of the County. Dolly Parton, meanwhile, had built her own legend out of the Smoky Mountains of Tennessee, climbing from poverty to become one of the most successful songwriters and performers in American music history, with hits like Jolene and I Will Always Love You, the latter which he'd later turned down, letting Elvis Presley record because his manager demanded half the publishing rights. Kenny and Dolly first paired up in 1983 on Islands in the Stream, a song written by the Bee Gees that producer Barry Gibb originally intended as an R&B track before reshaping it for the two country stars. It became a massive crossover hit, reaching #1 on the Billboard Hot 100, and making Rogers and Parton the first country duo since Glenn Campbell in 1968 to top the pop, country, and adult contemporary charts simultaneously. The Recording Industry Association of America has since certified the single triple platinum. What's striking, given how inseparable the two became in the public imagination, is how rarely they actually recorded together. Over 30 years of friendship, Kenny and Dolly released only 5 duets. Islands in the Stream in 1983, Love is Strange, Real Love, Christmas Without You, and finally, You Can't Make Old Friends in 2013. 3 of the 5 reached #1 on the country charts. Despite the chemistry audiences saw on stage and on television specials together, both have said publicly, in separate interviews, that their relationship was never romantic. Parton has described Rogers as being like a big brother to her. The platonic nature of their bond became part of their appeal. Two performers who clearly adored each other without the tabloid complications that usually came with that kind of chemistry. By the time they reunited in that Nashville studio in July 2013, both knew the math of their friendship had changed. Rogers was 74. He had already endured years of physical strain from decades of touring, arthritis, a prior back surgery, and ongoing health issues that had begun slowing him down. The song they'd chosen to record, written by Don Schlitz and Skip Ewing, was built around a simple, devastating idea that no matter how many new people come into your life, you can't manufacture the kind of history that comes from decades of friendship. The lyric, "What will I do when you are gone? Who's going to take your place?" wasn't written specifically for Kenny and Dolly, but recording together turned it into something deeply personal. According to people present in the studio that day, the session wasn't a typical professional run-through. The engineer recalled people in the room wiping away tears before the first verse had even finished. Rogers reportedly had to pause recording more than once to compose himself. This was a manufactured sentimentality for a music video. It was two old friends confronting, out loud, in song, the fact that one of them likely wouldn't be around much longer. When the song was released, it didn't perform spectacularly on the charts. It peaked at number 57. But chart position was never really the point. The music video, which intercut performance footage with photos and clips from their 3 decades of friendship, drew over 1 million views within 10 days. A striking number for two artists whose core fan base skewed well into middle age and beyond. The reaction made clear that audiences understood exactly what they were watching. Not a chart contender, but a documented farewell. It would be the last time Kenny Rogers and Dolly Parton ever recorded together. In the years that followed, Rogers' health continued to decline, even as he kept performing. In April 2018, partway through what had been billed as his farewell tour, The Gambler's last deal, he was forced to cancel final 8 shows after experiencing a dizzy spell on stage. Doctors advised him to stop touring altogether, and for the first time in over 6 decades of performing, he ended a tour without completing it. His final concert tally stood at 53 shows on that farewell run, a number he'd reportedly tracked meticulously in a notebook he'd kept since 1957. In May 2019, Rogers was hospitalized in Georgia, and his team described the cause as severe dehydration. The hospitalization sparked widespread rumors online that he was near death, and some reports claimed he was preparing to say goodbye to friends and family. His spokesperson publicly and explicitly pushed back on those rumors, calling them inaccurate, while confirming only that he would remain hospitalized for a period of recovery. He went on to live for nearly another year. Kenny Rogers died on March 20th, 2020, at his home in Sandy Springs, Georgia, at the age of 81. He was surrounded by his wife, Wanda, his twin sons, and his 3 older children. Because of the early stages of the COVID-19 pandemic, there was no large public funeral. Instead, landmarks around the country marked his passing in smaller ways. The Grand Ole Opry and the Astrodome in Houston both went dark in tribute, and venues in Las Vegas displayed lyrics from Lady on their marquees. A private service was held days later, and his ashes were placed in a cedar urn he had carved himself, decorated with a joker and a stack of poker chips, a quiet nod to the song that had defined the second half of his career. 1 week after his death, a previously unreleased song called Goodbye surfaced. It had been written by Lionel Richie and recorded quietly back in 2009, then shelved for over a decade. Richie later said the song's themes have felt too on the nose to release while Rogers was alive and healthy, but its arrival just after his death struck listeners as an eerie, unintended epitaph. It was streamed millions of times within its first few days online. Looking back, the real story of Kenny and Dolly's last duet doesn't need embellishment to be moving. 2 friends, both in their 70s, sat down to sing a song about the irreplaceable nature of old friendships, fully aware, even if no one said it directly, that they were running out of time to make more memories together. They didn't need a hospital room or a secret recording session to make that moment matter. The truth was sad enough on its own. An artist who had spent a lifetime singing about gamblers, drifters, and lovers finally sat down to sing honestly about mortality, with the one person whose friendship had outlasted for his 5 marriages and most of his career. Kenny Rogers sold over 120 million records across his lifetime, won 3 Grammy Awards, and was inducted into both the Country Music Hall of Fame and the Gaming Hall of Fame, the latter thanks to his long-running Las Vegas show built around the gambler. But for many fans, it's that quiet 2013 session in Nashville, 2 old friends singing about what they couldn't replace. That stands as his most honest goodbye.